Unveiled horrors, spine-chilling true tales of the cursed revealed in a sinister rainstorm. The storm raged outside, a furious beast clawing at the very foundations of Rachel's home. Thunder crashed like a wild drumroll, rattling the windows and making shadows dance like uninvited guests at her front door. Rachel, a weary single mother in her late 30s, finally returned from a grueling shift at the local hospital. Her heart thudded in her chest, not from exhaustion, but from dread. 6-year-old Ethan was waiting at home, full of innocence in a world that felt increasingly perilous. As she stepped onto her porch, something caught her eye: a series of notes, their jagged handwriting clawing at her sanity. "Stay inside," one read, "they're watching." A chill slithered down her spine, but she brushed it off as children's pranks. It had to be kids, right? But that haunting voice in her head whispered otherwise, filling her thoughts with paranoia over the neighbors she trusted. With every crack of thunder outside, she turned toward the kitchen, attempting to drown her fear in comfort food. But reality hit as the porch light sputtered and died, extinguishing her feeble shield of normalcy. A shiver raced through her, leaving her trembling in the darkness. Her breath quickened as she peered through the window, half convinced she saw something streak past. A flicker, a shadow. The walls seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, the whispers of the storm wrapping themselves around her thoughts, relentless and chilling. Just as she began to drift into panic, the name of the bartender from the local pub echoed in her mind. He used to spin tales of vanished friends, neighbors who melted into the night, leaving nothing but memories behind. Fumbling for her phone, Rachel dialed the police, feeling ridiculous as she did. Their indifferent chuckles only deepened her anxiety. "Don't worry, ma'am. It's just a storm," they laughed dismissively. She could almost hear the echoes of their disbelief. What if they were missing a very real threat? Before she could think it through, she grabbed the flashlight and ventured onto the porch again. The rain poured down like a torrent, relentless and overwhelming. But in the chaos, movement drew her eyes: dark figures emerging from the heavy rain, their masks obscuring their faces. Panic coursed through her veins, freezing her in place while every instinct screamed at her to run. Who were they? What kind of horror lurked beneath the surface of their suburb? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The chill in the air thickened like an icy hand clenching around her throat. Rachel rushed inside, gathering Ethan close, but all she felt was dread wrapping around her like a vice. The storm outside roared, as if it were a warning of the deeper darkness that lay beyond her walls. She secured the door as fear turned into fervent energy. The storm, just a prelude to the true terror waiting for her. The night that began with relentless rain turned into the stage of horrifying revelations and the very real threat of a sinister truth shrouded in the calm facade of her neighborhood. Would she find the courage to face it before the darkness swallowed them whole? Rachel clutched Ethan tightly, hoping to shield him from the chill that seeped through their home. The flickering light from the kitchen gave everything an eerie glow. Each crash of thunder felt like a rumble of warning, urging her to take action. She could feel Ethan's small body trembling, his face buried against her shoulder, innocent yet unaware of the horror looming outside their door. "Mommy, I'm scared," his voice came out as a whisper, laced with fear. Rachel forced a shaky smile, brushing a hand through his damp hair. "It's just the storm, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. The pounding of the rain grew heavier, the sound morphing into an unsettling rhythm that mirrored her racing heart. She gently pulled back from Ethan and stepped towards the window. Rain streaked the glass like the desperate tears she could barely hold back. The figures were still out there, shadows dancing just beyond the reach of her porch light. Were they watching her? Moments felt like hours as she strained to see through the sheets of rain. Her thoughts fumbled between disbelief and dread. Who were they, and why were they lurking? The tremors of fear settled deeper in her gut. What if they were not just harmless pranks, but something more sinister? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside. The force made her jump, heart pounding against her ribcage, drowning out the cacophony of the storm. "Stay here, Ethan," she said, firm but shaking. He nodded, eyes wide and glassy as fear washed over him. In that moment, every maternal instinct kicked in. She needed to know who was out there, and whether her little boy was safe. Gripping the flashlight tightly, she moved toward the door, the wind howling like a chorus of spirits outside. With each step, the darkness felt heavier, pressing against her, as if the very walls of the house were caving in around them. Then came a knock, sharp, deliberate. It hadn't been a figment of her imagination. Rachel froze. "Mommy, who is it?" Ethan's voice trembled, bringing her back to the moment. She wanted to scream that everything was fine, but the weight pressing on her heart told her otherwise. "Wait here," she whispered, trying to sound calm. She opened the door a crack, the hinges groaning like a dying animal. A gust of rain sprayed her face, and the sight beyond was a jumble of moving shadows. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The voice that emerged from the storm was husky, almost guttural. Rachel squinted against the rain, but the figures were obscured, their shapes blending into the shadows. "We just want to talk." "You're not safe here," they called out, words laced with an urgency that made her stomach drop. Her instincts screamed at her to bolt. Doubt coiled around her like a snake, squeezing tighter and tighter. The familiar shadow from the pub bartender loomed in her mind, his tales of disappearances, warnings wrapped in bars and bottles. Were these the harbingers of doom he had spoken of? "Mommy!" Ethan cried from inside, pulling her back to reality. She cast a final, desperate glance at the masked figures as the storm unleashed another thunderous roar. Just as she was about to shut the door completely, a glimmer shone in the dark, something metallic in the rain. "Wait!" It came again, insistent. "We can help you." But could they really? Rachel's heart raced, battling between the urge to protect her child and the pull of the unknown. She was on the brink of decision when the heavy rain shifted, revealing a gunmetal glint. Confusion seared through her mind. Weapons? Were they friend or foe? With her breath caught in her throat, she took a step back, preparing to slam the door, but that's when she noticed the unmistakable look in their eyes. Among the figures, one stepped forward, removing the mask. Recognition washed over her, and realization chilled her blood. It was a neighbor, a good friend from down the street, whose existence was shrouded in those very tales of disappeared souls. "Rachel. It's not safe." Her thoughts spiraled, drowning in dread as the storm intensified. What danger had her community been hiding? In that swirling chaos, a deep sense of foreboding settled. Not only were they in immediate peril, but they were amidst a truth darker than she could ever imagine. How far would she need to go to protect her son from the very place she called home? The wind howled in an unrelenting fury, whipping the rain against the house like an assault. Rachel's stomach churned at her neighbor's frantic words. Not safe, she thought, panic clawing at her throat. All these years, she had trusted him. But now, questions filled her mind like the storm outside. Were these figures truly there to help, or to bring doom? "Mommy, who is he?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, filled with confusion and fear. Rachel turned quickly to him, her hand instinctively reaching out to reassure him. She forced herself to look back at the man, Peter. He was knocking desperately on the door, his face half hidden in shadow, streaked with rain and dread. "Peter!" She called, her voice barely cutting through the sound of the storm. She had seen him often, sharing barbecues and kids' birthday parties. "What do you mean it's not safe?" "They're coming for you, Rachel." He yelled, his breath misting in the chilly air. Fear filled his eyes, wild and pleading. "You need to trust me. I can explain everything." As Rachel hesitated, the wall of her security and warmth cracked. Thunder rumbled angrily above them, the figures shifted, closing in from the edges of the light. Shadows danced and merged, growing darker and more menacing. Each flash of lightning revealed glimpses of faces covered in masks, eyes glinting with an eerie hunger. A familiar dread washed over her, a feeling she couldn't name. "Get in!" Peter shouted. "Now! Do you want to go outside and ask them why they're here?" Rachel shot back, fear causing her voice to tremble. She felt the door frame splinter beneath the pressure of her unsteady hands. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed against the back of the house. Rachel jumped, looking back toward the noise. There it was again, a slow, deliberate bang that sent a jolt of terror through her body. The walls quaked, and the lights flickered ominously. "Mommy, please." Ethan's voice dug into her, raw and scared. She turned to him, crouching down, forcing a calm she didn't feel. But how could she reassure him? Her heart was racing. Each frantic heartbeat screamed to act, yet her legs felt frozen like stone. "Rachel." Peter's voice pierced through the mayhem. "We don't have time. It's them or you." A shudder ran through Rachel, desperate to protect Ethan and unsure of the threats that loomed outside. Were these familiar faces truly harbingers of something evil? The very neighbors she shared laughter with now struck dread deep into the night. With a final piercing scream of thunder, the door quaked. A violent shudder made Rachel's heart thump in her chest as she realized the darkness outside was more than a simple storm. The shadows pressed closer, and she imagined them reaching for her. "Okay. Okay." Rachel gasped, adrenaline surging through her. "We'll let him in, quickly." She yanked the door open wider. But as she did, Peter stumbled back, gasping in terror. "Don't. It's not safe." Rachel's eyes widened in horrified disbelief, as behind him emerged one of the masked figures, faster than a flash of lightning. It lunged past Peter, knocking him to the ground. "No!" Rachel screamed, throwing herself in front of Ethan, her heart pounding in her ears. She could feel the heat radiating off the creature swarming through the opening like a living nightmare. Ethan whimpered, clutching her leg tightly. She could feel his small frame trembling, helpless. Rachel's mind raced, but reason had been stripped bare. No logic could exist in the face of terror. The room spun as the masked figure twisted closer, eyes boring into Rachel's soul, and then, she felt it, a churning at her gut. It wasn't a feeling she could fight off. The ground below felt unsteady. The world faded to shadows and screams as she realized they weren't just figures, they were a part of something wicked. "Ethan!" She gasped, the dark beckoning behind her. But as she turned back to grab him, a violent blast of icy air swept through the room, laced with sinister whispers that promised watching eyes. Ethan was pulled from her grasp. "Run!" Rachel screamed into the chaos, panic igniting her. But before any action could manifest, everything erupted into darkness, surrounding them in a choking tempest of dread. And as Rachel stumbled, searching for her son through the enveloping gloom, a voice from the shadows declared, "You can't save him, you were never meant to." The thunder roared again, shrouded in the haunting truth of a storm that hid far more than the world knew. What had she unleashed? The darkness swallowed Rachel, thick and suffocating. It curled around her like a serpent, tightening as she gasped for breath, lost in the intangible void. She could hear Ethan's frantic cries, a desperate plea that pierced through the encroaching shadows. "Mommy!" Ethan's voice felt like a lifeline, yet it flickered and waned, swallowed by an unseen predator lurking just beyond her reach. Rachel stumbled, propelled by an instinct she couldn't comprehend. She pressed forward, arms stretched out. As she moved, the whispers around her grew louder, forming twisted promises and taunts that sank deep into her mind. "You're too late," he's ours. With every step, dread coiled tighter around her heart. She felt an unsettling warmth, a presence creeping up her back, like fingers tracing her spine. She twisted, looking for an escape, but saw nothing but a formless void, devoid of light and hope. "Ethan!" She shouted, her voice cracking. The sound was swallowed by the storm, drowned by the relentless wind outside that shrieked violently against the walls of her home. Lightning sparked once more, illuminating the suffocating dark for just a heartbeat. Shadows twisted, silhouetting more figures as they locked eyes on her. Panic rose in her throat as she struggled to break free from the misty grip that threatened to hold her in place. Ethan. In the flicker of light, she spotted something, a small figure huddled in the corner of the room, staring wide-eyed into the darkness. Mommy. Relief surged through her, but it was short-lived. The shadows shifted, rushing toward them, swirling in chaotic patterns. Rachel plunged forward, reaching for him. "I'm coming, sweetheart." Before she could grasp him, the storm raged louder, an otherworldly howl that resonated deep within her. The masked figures solidified around Ethan, surrounding him like wolves closing in on their prey. "Mommy!" Ethan screamed, terror painting his face as he tried to back away, his small legs trembling beneath him. "No! Get away from him!" Rachel lunged, but they were too fast, too many. A heavy mist rolled in, sinking into her skin, leeching her strength, filling her with despair. She could feel the cold seep into her bones as if life itself was being withdrawn. The echoes of their laughter chilled her blood. "He belongs to us," the voice called sweetly, an eerie imitation of comfort. "He will join us, or you will all perish." Rachel's heart raced, desperation clawing at her. The wall of shadows descended once more, shrouding Ethan, pulling him toward them. "No!" she roared, adrenaline coursing through her veins. With everything in her, she charged through the dark, her mind ablaze with a primal instinct to protect. But as she reached him, icy fingers grasped her shoulders, pulling her back. "You'll never have him." Just as she felt herself losing ground, a blinding burst of light erupted in the room, cutting through the darkness like a sword. Rachel squinted against it, the brilliance revealing a figure among the shadows. Peter. His voice rang clear, cutting through the chaos. "Fight, Rachel. You can't let them take him." Summoning every ounce of her will, she wrestled against the hands gripping her. "Ethan. Hold on." Shadows shrieked, twisting into elongated shapes of anguish, and the light pushed harder, illuminating the chaotic scene. Rachel gripped Ethan's hand, feeling the warmth of his tiny fingers. The air crackled with tension, both light and shadow battling fiercely in a dazzling array. But even as they fought, Rachel sensed the encroaching darkness tightening around them, relentless and hungry. The laughter morphed into shrieks, a cacophony of despair that promised suffering. "Fight your fears, Rachel." Peter bellowed, eyes wild with determination. A choice loomed before her: submit to the darkness or battle against it with every shred of strength she possessed. The world around them whirled into chaos, and as the light began to ebb, she heard a final chilling whisper that sent shivers racing down her spine. "You have not seen the last of us." The light faltered, and the shadows crept closer, promising a reckoning that Rachel now understood was only just beginning. What lay beyond this moment, she couldn't imagine, but she knew one truth deep in her bones: she would find a way to save Ethan, even if it cost her everything. But who or what would rise with them from the darkness? The shadows clung to Rachel like a second skin, an unseen force tugging her back into the abyss. She could feel the weight of the darkness around her, pressing down like a funeral shroud, as the frantic cries of her son echoed in her ears. "Mommy. Please." Ethan's voice was a beacon, but the shadows craved him. They pulsed and writhed in the corners of her vision, sending icy tendrils of fear snaking through her veins. She couldn't let them take him. Was this really happening? Was her mind fracturing under pressure? "No." She gasped, shaking her head, willing herself to see through the chaos. Peter was still there, his eyes locked onto hers, fierce with defiance. "Strength, Rachel. Focus on the light." Peter shouted, his commanding tone cutting through the pall of despair. She drew in a shuddering breath, wiping the perspiration from her brow. A flicker of hope surged within her, stirring memories of strength, of a love fierce enough to challenge the darkness. "Ethan. She yelled again, forcing her arms forward, breaking through the suffocating mist. She could almost feel the warmth of his presence, grounding her. I'm coming. The darkness surged, spiraling outwards like a storm unleashed, and for a moment, Rachel could see the figures lurking within it. Their faces twisted, eyes hollow and endless, mouths stretching into sadistic grins. Whispers exploded from their semblances, swarming her mind. Come join us, so much better here, no pain, no. Rachel roared. Her voice echoed, fierce and raw. The laughter from the shadows turned to howls of outrage, a cacophony that shook her to the core. A sacrifice must be made. One figure screeched, lunging toward her. It was momentarily illuminated by another flash of lightning. Its eyes, blacker than space, bored into her soul, rendering her speechless. Peter, what do we do? She screamed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. We fight. Together. Peter's voice reverberated through her consciousness, pulling her back from the brink. With a fierce shout, Rachel pushed forward, feeling the weight of the shadows lessen, if only slightly. Ethan. Hold on. As she strode deeper into the darkness, shoving the oppressive weight away, the room quaked. The winds howled, rattling the walls, and a sickening chill seeped into her bones. Ghostly figures darted around her, reaching out with gnarled fingers. Mommy, please. Ethan's small voice quivered, layered with fear. She caught a glimpse of him still huddled and terrified but now radiating his own light. Ethan, I'm here. I'm not leaving you. With each word, light began to flicker like a candle in the abyss, illuminating the corners where shadows bowed in fear. The laughter turned to screeching, and she felt the icy claws retract, the darkness trembling, but then the shadows leered, and their murmurs changed, dripping with malice. We'll be back, it's never over. As the last ounce of strength surged through her, the flickering light seemed to grow bright enough to sear the shadows away. Rachel extended her hand toward Ethan, who reached back with trembling fingers, more light sparking between them. For him, she whispered, summoning every bit of love she could muster. We will fight until our last breath. But in that moment, just as hope emerged, the shadows recoiled and then they surged again, crashing back with an even wilder fury, brighter and darker, swirling like a tempest. What if this is only the beginning? Rachel screamed into the storm, her voice breaking. Before she could process it, the shadows swallowed everything, and the echoes of their threats resonated in her core. They had not only claimed her faith but left an ominous promise that in the swirling void, a flicker of something sinister emerged, and Rachel felt the ground beneath her begin to tremble. Mommy! Ethan cried, his voice barely audible now. As the darkness enveloped them, she had one last thought: what awaited them when the shadows returned? With heart racing and uncertainty pounding in her chest, Rachel braced herself for whatever was to come next. The storm raged on, and as the shadows pressed closer, Rachel felt like she was drowning in their malevolence. She pulled Ethan closer, her heart pounding like a drum. We need to keep moving, she shouted, but her voice was lost in the howling tempest around them. The darkness trembled, a beast entwined in shifting forms. A voice slithered through the chaos, coiling around her. What can you do against us, little mother? Your strength flickers like a vapor in the wind. The shadows pulsed, seemingly feeding off her fear, growing more palpable, more monstrous. Peter's presence beside her was a burning ember in the chaos. Focus on Ethan. He urged, his voice steady even as the darkness writhed. Rachel turned her gaze, finding Ethan's terrified eyes reflecting her own fear. He clutched his small stuffed bear, the only remnant of safety in this nightmare. Ethan, listen to me. She said firmly, breaking through the swirling mass. You have to hold on to that light you found. It's inside you. His breath hitched, and for a brief moment, doubt flickered across his face before a spark ignited. I will, Mommy. He nearly whispered. In that instant, Rachel felt a glimmer of hope. But the shadows were relentless. They moved like a tide, lapping at her feet, visceral and alive. You cannot escape. They screeched, their voices merging into 1,000 tortured cries that reverberated in her mind. With each heartbeat, the darkness pressed closer, seeping into their thoughts, unleashing memories of despair. Images surfaced, horrifying and raw, silenced screams of those who had lost before them. The witching hour's promise of chaos lay just beyond the veil. Rachel's resolve hardened. "We won't let you take him. You hear me?" The pitch of her voice broke through the oppressive din, a challenge flung into the void. With her body vibrating with raw fear, she gathered every ounce of maternal power within her. Ethan began to glow, a halo of light emanating from his small frame. His courage was a small fire against the dark, flickering but defiant. But the shadows twisted and roared, clawing at this new beacon, searching for the crack they could exploit. "Join us!" they cried, their long-fingered shadows hissing like an angry swarm. "Leave this world of pain. All will be forgotten." "No," Rachel cried, ripping through their seductive whispers. "We will not surrender. You are nothing." Her voice echoed, mixing with Ethan's newfound energy, pushing the darkness back. The figures recoiled slightly, revealing their true form for a fleeting instant, twisted, sorrowful, and deflated, as if time and torment had drained them. Rachel felt their desperation, their hunger for souls lost in grief. And in that moment, a stark realization struck her: these shadows were not just monsters, they had been people too, victims chained by their own despair. While wrestling with the horror of this truth, she faltered. Their dark power surged again, clawing at her precious moment of clarity, and the shadows pressed forward like an avalanche. "You can't save them, and you can't save him." "Maybe not," Rachel gasped, feeling the weight of both despair and hope pulling her two ways. "But I can save us." An electrifying silence fell briefly. Then, the shadows shrieked in rage, spiraling into a violent vortex. As they descended, Rachel grasped Ethan's hand tightly. "Ready?" "No." Ethan cried as they were enveloped once more, but Rachel felt the warmth radiating from him as they fell deeper. Was she leading him to a darker fate, or to freedom? Just then, a crack of blinding light burst through the shroud, illuminating the faces of despair surrounding them. Was that an exit? Or the trap of their own nightmares? "Mommy," Ethan's voice trembled, more uncertain now. Rachel's heart sank as they barreled toward the light. A gut-wrenching scream erupted around them, drowning out her certainty. What lay ahead was becoming painfully unclear. Would they find salvation, or would they join the shadows forever? The light engulfed them, a blinding surge that burned at Rachel's eyes. For a moment, she thought they had escaped the clutches of despair. But the warmth of the light began to twist, morphing into something eerie, something alive that gripped her soul. Suddenly, they were no longer falling. They stood in an oppressive silence, the storm reduced to a distant rumble. Ethereal mist curled at their feet, and the vibrant light now resembled a ghostly fog, casting ominous shadows all around. Rachel wheeled around frantically, her heart a prisoner of fear. "Where are we?" Ethan whispered, clutching his bear tighter, the toy's eyes wide with fright. "I don't know, baby," Rachel replied, her voice quivering. Everywhere they looked, remnants of a forgotten world flickered in and out of existence. Faded photographs hung in the air, images of laughter and joy soon interrupted by flashes of terror. Faces twisted in anguish emerged, only to dissolve before she could make sense of them. The shadows were gone, but their presence lingered, filling the air with an unease that made Rachel's skin crawl. "Ethan, we have to find a way out." Her voice had lost its power, reduced to mere tones of anxiety and uncertainty. She held Ethan's hand tighter, scanning the abyss around them for clues, for life. The remnants swirled like whispers around them, but the words twisted into maddening echoes. "Help us, save us," they pleaded, but Rachel couldn't discern if the voices belonged to the shadows or the lost souls trapped in torment. "No!" she shouted, the sound of her own voice surprising her amidst the abyss. "I want to help you. My son, I just want my son." A wave of anger crashed through the eerie tableau, and the images began to swirl violently, distorting and reshaping themselves. Faces young, old, forgotten materialized, their eyes filled with darkness. "You brought us here!" they shrieked, their bodies flickering like candle flames about to extinguish. "You must decide." "Decide?" Rachel repeated, the thickness of dread knotting in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "Every choice binds you," they howled, voices rising above the wind. "To save one is to lose another. Choose between love and despair." "Peter." Panic surged through her. Was Peter lost in this dark beat? What about him? The faces twisted in collective sorrow, and for the first time, Rachel felt pity for them. "He is gone. No hope for him remains. But if you leave him, your son will be safe." Rachel staggered back, her heart pounding with agony at the thought. "No. I wouldn't. I can't." Her mind twisted with images of Peter, his reassuring smile, and the monstrous shadows that had pursued them. Then, a new voice crept through the mist, soft yet laced with malice. "But what if it was never up to you? What if all your choices are just illusions? Who are you?" Rachel cried, her voice trembling with the weight of despair. "I am the storm," it whispered, the edges of the mist sharp and dark, "and I am just getting started." A sudden clap of thunder shook the ground beneath them, the light flickered ominously, dimming with every heartbeat. Reality began to warp, the ground threatening to swallow them whole. "No. Ethan, hold on to me!" she yelled, gripping her son as the world around them began to collapse, shadows rushing back with vengeful fury. What was real? What was a lie? As darkness consumed them once more, Rachel's mind spiraled with questions. Would they make it out unscathed? Or would they be consumed by the wretched shadows that preyed on their very souls? The storm wasn't over yet, and the worst was yet to come. The ground trembled beneath them, a cold grip tightening around Rachel's throat as the shadows snarled and hissed. The once familiar sensation of her son's small hand felt slippery and vague. She clutched harder, terror coursing through her veins. She couldn't afford to lose Ethan. "Mommy!" Ethan's voice shook, a mix of fear and desperation. "Where's Daddy? Focus on me, Ethan. Just hold on to me." Rachel shouted over the chaos, her breath coming in jagged gasps. The mists thickened, coiling like serpents around her, each tendril seemingly alive with malice. She could feel the shadows whispering, reaching for her, scratching at her mind with promises of despair and secrets better left buried. With every passing second, the atmosphere grew heavier. Each flickering image in the fog was a stinging reminder of the lives lost, of decisions not made. Faded laughter echoed through the void, then morphed into wails of anguish that clawed at her sanity. The faces that emerged were once filled with joy, now twisted in grief. "Choose!" they cried, their voices piercing the air. "Either abandon him, or risk losing all." Rachel pressed her eyes shut, drowning in the chaos. The world around her felt unreal. Memories washed over her, the happiness of family dinners, the warm embrace of Peter, the way he would make them laugh. And then, darkness. A silence suffocating, as if the air itself sought to swallow her whole. Opening her eyes, she saw Ethan's terrified face, painted with confusion. "Mommy, please!" The mist pulsed, swirling into a vicious vortex. Rachel stumbled backward, the ground unsteady, a sickening wave of dread rolling in the storm wanted to take them. She took a step forward, determined, but the shadows rapidly swirled around her, blocking her way. "You must decide. You can't escape." "No!" Rachel screamed, spinning in place. "We won't choose. We will find a way." The shadows laughed, a sound like splintering wood and shattering glass. "Hope is a luxury you will not possess," they hissed. As if in response, the whispers grew louder, drowning her thoughts, hammering at her mind, swarming like insects seeking flesh. And then something shifted within her. A pulse of anger surged, a memory of Peter's laughter igniting a fire in her chest. "Leave us alone!" she screamed, forcing her will against the suffocating tide. You don't own us. We are stronger than you. In response, the shadows surged violently, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down. Rachel gasped. She felt vibration travel through her bones, a horrific sensation of being linked to every memory of loss and sorrow that ever existed. Ethan screamed, the sound piercing through the chaos, and with it, she felt something snap, a raw instinct pushing her further into the darkness. Suddenly, the mist erupted around them like an explosion, revealing a vast expanse of emptiness. Rachel steadied her gaze, looking down below, where nothing but a chasm of despair awaited them. The silhouettes of faces materialized once more, eyes pleading, reaching out with ghostly fingers dripping with sorrow. Help us. Save us. They begged, and for a brief moment, Rachel felt that familiar tug of pity again. But deeper, another force wrenched at her fierce determination. No. She shouted, grounding herself. We're leaving. With a desperate lunge, she began to run, dragging Ethan along, his small legs moving furiously to keep pace. The edges of her reality cracked as shadows gave chase, but she wouldn't stop. As they barreled ahead, the echoes of forgotten memories clawed at her mind, but she focused on Ethan, the rhythm of his small heart against the chaos. They could not succumb. They had to escape. Yet, ahead loomed a figure, dark and twisted. A silhouette of Peter, face marred by anguish but eyes gleaming with hope. Help me, Rachel. I'm here. Rachel felt her heart drop. Was he real? Or was this another cruel trick? Fear tried to claw at her, but she couldn't stop. Would she choose to believe in the fading light of hope or lose herself in despair? Mommy, wait. Ethan cried, tugging at her arm, suddenly rooted in place, his eyes wide with horror. Rachel turned to him, panic rushing in waves. We have to move. We can't stay here. But the shadows froze her in place again, forming walls of darkness around them. As the storm raged on, her choice loomed before her. Would she reach for that glimmer of hope, or would the shadows claim her son forever? And suddenly, in that looming uncertainty, Rachel realized the shadows weren't just after them. They craved something much darker, something from within. Just then, a thunderous crack echoed, and the world rippled beneath their feet, sending them careening into a void of utter black. What lay beyond the darkness? And would Rachel finally discover whether love could conquer despair, or if the storm would claim everything she held dear? Out of the void, light flickered and danced, teasing them with a half-formed reality. Rachel blinked, momentarily disoriented as the shadows entwined around her and Ethan, shifting like smoke and claws. She strained to look back toward the darkness that had swallowed her whole. Mommy. Ethan's voice wavered, blending into the staccato whispers of the shadows. Tears welled in his eyes, reflecting the chaos surrounding them. Rachel guided him closer, fixing her gaze ahead. The landscape twisted, colors bleeding into one another, creating a surreal kaleidoscope. An oppressive dread pressed down on her chest, smothering hope. Maybe that silhouette, the one that looked like Peter, had been a mirage crafted by the mists. Stay close, she instructed, but her voice carried the weight of desperation. The fog thickened, and the once familiar terrain became alien and treacherous beneath their feet. The air tasted sharp with regret, and as she moved forward, Rachel wondered whether she was really trying to escape or simply leading them deeper into the abyss. Suddenly, Ethan stumbled, caught off balance by something unseen. Rachel reached out, saving him from falling into the shifting ground, but he was startled. Mommy, I'm scared. I know, sweetheart. She replied, forcing herself to stay calm even as panic clawed at her thoughts. Every inch of her screamed to flee. But flee to where? The void that surrounded them seemed endless and alive, wrapping around them like a predator slowly tightening its grip. The shadows stirred, whispering her name with malevolent glee. Rachel, Rachel, you cannot escape your fate, they chimed, a sickening chorus that threatened her sanity. As she ran, they seemed to reflect her fears, their voices echoing memories of guilt, decisions that lingered like echoes from the past, haunting her with what might be lost. Mommy. Ethan's cry cut through her thoughts, sharp like glass. She turned, knowing she had to protect him. Shadows rose up at his feet, twisting and flickering with sickly laughter. Just as Rachel lunged to pull him free, a darker shape loomed closer, coalescing from the mist that it took form a monstrous figure, sewn from the very fabric of despair that surrounded them all. It grasped at the air, reaching toward Ethan with long, skeletal fingers, each movement full of hunger. No! Rachel screamed, flinging herself between her son and the approaching horror. The air grew colder, each breath became a struggle against an unseen weight. What had happened to Peter? Was he somewhere in this hell, or had this night finally broken him? Rachel, the voice of the figure shifted, a whisper that soothed and tormented at once. You were always meant to join us. Betrayal lingers heavier than you think. With a flick of its hand, the figure conjured flashes of Rachel's past, the car accident, the shattered glass, the unyielding grief. Her heart tightened, reality piling on top of her. Choose, Rachel. The shadows hissed, the cacophony rising to a deafening pitch. Choose to save your son, or save yourself. Sacrifice one to bind the other. The ground beneath her trembled once more, a reminder of how thin the line was between fear and desperation. Rachel's pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out doubt. Closure became an impossibility. It seemed she would bear the weight of both choices. Ethan tugged at her sleeve, wide-eyed with terror, a precious life hanging in the balance. Mommy, I don't want to choose. But Rachel felt the shadows closing in, squirming, clamoring for his innocence and her resolve. She planted her feet, gripping Ethan's hand tightly. I will not abandon you. She shouted defiantly. The figure roared in frustration, the whispering shadows screeching in unison as they recoiled momentarily. Then you will face the consequence, Rachel, it snarled, as the swirling fog enveloped them again, pulling them deeper into the nightmare. In that moment, Rachel knew they were on the brink. One decision, one moment would determine their fate. She could feel the shadows creeping in, tightening their hold on her and Ethan, a vice of despair, and with each pounding heartbeat, a question burned in her mind. What if saving Ethan meant damning herself? Terror knitted through her as the darkness closed in, and the realization settled. Perhaps the shadows already knew the answer. Light flickered once more in the distance, but was it hope or another trap? As the last threads of her reality unraveled, Rachel steeled herself for the trial ahead. She had to uncover the truth before it consumed them both. What was waiting for them on that ledge of light? Would the tormentors reveal their true power, or would Rachel finally confront the shadows of her past? The storm outside was a distant echo, a fading memory as Rachel stood in the remnants of chaos. Light flickered before her like a fragile flicker of hope, illuminating the faces of lost souls that twisted through the fog still tangled around them. But amid the shadows, a fierce determination flared within Rachel. Ethan! She shouted, gripping her son's hand with a love that pulsed against the darkness. The shadows loomed around them, crawling and twisting, attempting to unravel the bond they shared. Their whispers curled through Rachel's thoughts, each word attempting to break her spirit. They toyed with her, weaving memories that cut deep, bringing forth the pain she thought buried. You left him, you should have saved him. No. Rachel screamed at the swirling mass, her voice soaring above the cacophony. You don't get to win. I will protect him with every ounce of my strength. Ethan huddled close, his eyes wide with terror, yet a single spark of defiance burned in their depths. The innocent light he radiated pushed back against the suffocating darkness, causing the shadows to writhe with fury. They recoiled slightly, as if they could feel the urgency of Rachel's love. Come on, sweetheart. Rachel urged, pulling Ethan closer as she charged forward, every step fueled by fierce determination. We're getting out of here. Together, they pushed through the darkness, hearts pounding in unison. But the shadows, sensing their escape, surged forward with renewed vigor. You cannot escape what you are, they whispered, their voices dripping with malice. Every word dredged up memories of grief, whispers of her failures, haunting reminders of choices made in fear. Suddenly, a crack of light erupted from within the darkness. Peter emerged, his presence illuminating the chaos, eyes fierce with resolve. Rachel. Fight back. Remember who you are. His voice rang clear amidst the turmoil, igniting a fire within Rachel. The shadows stiffened, momentarily distracted by his defiance. We choose love. Rachel shouted, bringing forth every ounce of strength in her body. Ethan, hold on to me. She cried, and as they gripped each other tightly, a shield of brilliance formed, glowing brightly against the threatening tide. The light flickered, straining against the shadows pressing in, but it held firm, a protective barrier born of their bond. Then came the haunting laughter, swirling through the darkness. You think you can beat us? You were always meant to choose. No. Rachel roared, stepping forward. We don't choose. We are choosing for us. Your power is nothing against the bond of love. With those words, the light exploded into a triumphant flare, illuminating the horror surrounding them with fierce brilliance. The shadows shrieked, their forms contorting in agony as they recoiled from the pulse of hope cascading from Rachel and Ethan's union. It was love meeting despair, light crashing into darkness. The landscape shifted, a shift more intense than she had ever known, as the shadows splintered and scattered. A blinding light surrounded Rachel and Ethan, wrapping around them like a protective cocoon. Just hold on, Mama. Ethan urged, his own inner strength shining through the fear. I want to let you go. Rachel promised, and in that moment, she knew they would face whatever came next together. The shadows, those dark tormentors of despair, sought to return, but true love burned brighter and proved resilient against the storm. As the shadows fled, the light expanded, breaking through the clutches of despair and revealing a new world, a world where darkness couldn't tread. The raging storm outside began to calm, the tempest faded into the distance. Behind them, a memory of what they survived, exhausted yet victorious. Rachel knelt, drawing Ethan into her arms as the brilliance faded slowly, revealing the serene landscape bathed in soft light. Peace wrapped around them, erasing the fear that had threatened to consume everything they held dear. It felt safe. Mommy, Ethan whispered, his small fingers tracing her cheek. Will it be okay now? Tears of joy filled Rachel's eyes. As she nodded. Yes, baby. We made it. Together. She looked into his eyes, a profound understanding washed over her. They were free, finally free from the shadows that had haunted them. And she would spend every day cherishing this bond they had forged, strong enough to survive the darkest of storms, but the darkness would always whisper, lurking at the edges of reality. Yet now Rachel knew that love had the power to shield against the lurking shadows. As quiet settled, Rachel took Ethan's hand. Let us go home, my love. Together. And as they began to walk forward, the world glimmered with potential, a new beginning forged from the fires of conflict. The shadows may have threatened them, but now, they face whatever came next armed with love, their greatest weapon, and the only light they would ever need. Back in the quiet of her living room, Rachel blinked back the tears of relief, letting echoes of laughter fill the space, knowing a brighter future awaited them. Don't miss out on more gripping tales. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. We'd love to hear from you, so flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support matters. Only true fans understand the importance of keeping the love alive.